even though I'm doing what I've always wanted to do, it ain't hitting me the same way. Just because I take things doesn't mean I have to give you things. You know, these transitions that you're constantly on, is it really the Lord or is it you? So I'll let you have what you've been praying for, crying over. I'll let you have it, but you're gonna see it's not where you're meant to be.
Welcome to Conversation with Haych, and we have another amazing guest with us here today. She is an international speaker and preacher, an author of a book entitled Emerge Out of the Old into the New, a practical guide to living out your calling. She's also the founder of Emerge Worldwide Organization, a non-profit organization which aims to abolish sexual exploitation and sex trafficking everywhere, as well as the founder of the Pure Consecration, a time to radically deepen in relationship with God through worship, prayer, fasting, and community. She is an elder at Ruach City Church. She is hilarious. You need to follow her on Instagram, because what might happen is you might catch the Holy Ghost and belly laughs at the same time. She is a daughter, she is a sister and auntie. She's a former karate fighter. She's the incredible, the amazing. Some of you know as Elder. But here today, we're calling her Sharlette Reid. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be on here. Yeah, I like how you did that. It was so cool.
So for those who don't know who you are,
Yeah.
who is Sharlette Reid?
Sharlette Reid is coming out to a big birthday soon.
Okay.
She is well-humoured. She is a hard worker, definitely. A lover of people, a lover of food, a lover of travel and adventure. What else is Sharlette? Sharlette is spontaneous, a bit unpredictable at times. Yeah, but I'm pretty cool. I'd like to think I'm pretty cool. And all the other stuff you said.
That's good. So let's go back a little bit. In 3 words, how would you describe younger Sharlette?
Confident, innovative, and a lover. Yeah.
Why those 3 words?
I think confidence more about like my personality, and I like to move into things with confidence and commitment, you know, whether it's projects or things I'm doing personally or my family. I like to come to anything with a certain level of knowing that I'm meant to be doing something, I'm meant to be part of something, you know. Innovative because I'm very entrepreneurial, so I like to create things. I like to mold things, shape things, watch things grow, watch things flourish. And I've pushed a lot of that into like the businesses I've done over the years and stuff like that. So, and love it because I genuinely love people, big, large, small, nice, ugly, in between. Yeah, I think it's a big part of who I am, you know? So yeah, that's probably those 3.
If you could describe your childhood in 1 sentence, what would it be?
My childhood was tough. But at the same time, a journey of discovering myself. Yeah.
Explain kind of the tough part and the journey of discovering yourself.
Well, it was really, I mean, I have 2 brothers, Daniel and Storm, and I have an older sister as well. So people are like, oh my gosh, you're the oldest. I'm not, right? I just act like it. And we didn't really have a very close relationship with my sister until many years on. But growing up, you know, my dad was in the military, he was in the forces.
Okay.
So we traveled with him, we lived in Germany, we lived in Cyprus for a bit. And my dad was a very strong disciplinarian, you know. He was giving you the proper licks, you know. And being in the military makes you even more, you know, strict when it comes to like discipline and all of those things, you know. So we're at home, you know, my dad calls us, he wants to hear, yes, daddy, before you even come down the stairs, you know. So it was little things like that. He was quite tough on us, and that's how I ended up getting into karate, because I was getting bullied at primary school.
Oh, wow.
My dad found out, and I remember being in the back seat in my, like, you know, tap dancing shoes and my tutu, and my dad looked at me in the rear, you know, kind of mirror and said, you're not going back. And I was like, what? Yeah, I've been going to this place like nearly every Saturday morning. And he was like, no, you know, your mum told me you're being bullied, and we got to toughen you up, you know. So my dad was just very strict on us, and I think my mum was that gentle balance.
Yeah.
You know, she helped us to really discover who we were, and she was very creative and very artsy as well. So with a little, she could do quite a bit. So that's probably why I define it a bit like that. Yeah, I had a couple of little personal challenges as well that made it a little bit rougher coming through life, you know. My parents went through a divorce, so that was quite different. When my dad was in the army in Iraq and Falklands, he wasn't actually around, you know. So he used to write to us in letters, and that's how we knew he was still alive and he was still going, you know. But your parents there, but they're not there, as in physically present. And I think that absence in the long term had more of a knock-on effect than I realized. But we weathered through it, and I discovered a lot about myself in the process. My dad and my mum, very much people who wanted you to know who you are, you know. As a young lady, as a woman, to be fearless, to be tenacious, to be ambitious. You know, my dad wouldn't even have people really mention things about racial injustice too heavy because he never wanted us to see that as a barrier. It was quite interesting. Not that he didn't want us to know it existed. He had us watch Roots and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he never wanted us to use it as an excuse from pushing into or moving into any spheres of work or industry, career, influence, whatever it would be.
When did you realize? There's two questions I want to ask, and I'm trying to figure out which is the best one to ask next. The best one to ask next is, did you feel like you were pushed very quickly into having to discover yourself with everything that you experienced whilst you were growing up? Do you feel like the process was now quicker than probably the average person would be?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, I'd probably say that it felt a little bit more expedited because when my dad wasn't around, of course, me and my brothers would really have to kind of step up and make sure we're supporting my mom and all of those type of things. My mum was working like double shift, night work, day work. She'd put us to bed, creep back out, go and do midwifery. Wow. So, you know, in times like that, as the older sibling of my two brothers, you kind of feel some sense of responsibility. My dad, coming from lots and lots of siblings, used to always put a lot of responsibility on me as like the eldest sibling. You know, so sometimes you just get licks just to let your brothers know, you know, that's not what you do. So yeah, I had to grow up quickly, and I had to learn things quickly, and I had to be that grown, I would say, more independent individual. And I think that was expected of me. I think my dad expected when he wasn't around, I stepped up to the plate, you know. And after the divorce with my parents, whilst I was still at secondary school, I felt like I had this responsibility to really protect my brothers, you know, just to be there, to defend them, to look out for them. And I really took that on, you know. So yeah, I think those things hastened the process. Yeah.
When do you, in those moments, when do you take time for you? Because it seems like there's a lot of responsibility that you have with the family.
Yeah.
Then your parents divorced, and then you've got now a lot of responsibility for your brothers.
Yeah.
When do you find time for you, or when do you discover yourself in this journey?
Probably when I went to university.
Okay.
Because when I went to uni, leaving secondary school was the time when I really wanted to go somewhere that was completely away from home. I was like, you know, get me away from here. I want to find myself. And I still had a lot of raw emotion from the divorce and things like that. So I think it was at uni that I kind of went on this journey of discovery. The year before I went to uni is when I got saved.
Okay.
So that helped me to rediscover myself through the lens of Christ. But I was still trying to work out and deal with lots of ruptures and issues that I'd picked up along the way and come face to face with that. But of course, I was away from my church community. So that was a lot of kind of, you know, finding myself, discovering who is Sharlette, making bad choices, you know. I had a few relationships whilst I was at uni. And, you know, I had to go through the strokes and learn particular things for myself. So that was very much a deep discovery time for me. Yeah, 100%.
What advice would you give to younger Charlotte, who's experienced all of these things, who's gone through all of these things? With all that you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self?
That's a good one. I would say, Sharlette, it gets better. Yeah, it gets better. I think sometimes as a young person, when you are looking at life, as a young person, you very much do compare what you have with everyone else around you, your friends and what they have, their parents and what they have and how they engage and stuff like that. And so I feel very much like you can get stuck and think, oh, I'm always going to be in this situation. I'm always going to feel this pain. I'm always going to feel this disappointment. I'm always going to feel this kind of loneliness. I'm always going to feel like, and sometimes I felt like that, a bit of an outsider. Because I'd done so much travel for so many years. I didn't have a problem making relationships with people or friendships with people. But I just felt like,
You don't have a settled place.
yeah, you're constantly moving. I mean, even my adulthood, about a year ago, I had to just stop for a second and be like, Shah, you know, this transitions that you're constantly on, is it really the Lord or is it you? Is it me still used to the constant moves and shifts and ruptures and not necessarily being still for too long? And I just had to sit with that. I had to really pray into that because I was like, am I still on the move? Am I still in the throngs of place to place, location to location? And I just haven't learned to rest somewhere. You know what I'm saying? But there were some things I had to address, but in the long term, I felt like, Shah, you're making some right decisions because life is pushing you in a particular direction. But I'm always cautious. I'm always asking myself those questions on the inside, you know, because you can get into patterns and cycles, rhythms and moments, momentums in your life. And sometimes you think they're healthy and they're not. You know, it's just a pattern you've got used to, you know. So I'm always, asking myself those questions, you know.
Do you know where you was kind of moving to? Because if you're asking yourself this question just a year ago, did you really know where you were moving to, or was it just force of habit kind of thing, do you reckon?
I feel like last year God really asked me to move away from a lot of things, like my business I had had for several years. The Lord was like, you need to step away from that. And that was really hard because I've been teaching kids for nearly 6 or 7 years in my business. I had staff team, I had contracts with schools. And I was like, you want me to give up all of this? You know? But it was confirmed so many times. I knew, okay, God, I know this is you. And then it was like, you know, my car went, and then it was another aspect of business that I had to let go of as well. And then in the midst of that, I was kind of racking up all the closures that had happened, the transition to RUAC a couple of years before. I was like, it just feels like a lot of endings, and I can't see any beginnings here. I can't see where's the light, you know? And so, you know, sometimes we say to people, as one door closes, another door opens. Well, it's not completely true. As one door closes, sometimes you have to wait a long time before the next door opens.
Wow, that's so true.
You know? And I remember when I got to that point, I was like, God, what's next? Because I felt like if everything's shutting down, it's another move, it's another transition. And it felt like so many things were closing down. And I remember just before I went to Dubai last year, the Lord just hit me with this one question. He said, Shah, just because I take things doesn't mean I have to give you things. And I was like, right. And it was like, if I didn't give you anything else, another blessing, another open door, another opportunity, would you still serve me in the same way? And that hit me because I was like, I'm so used to it ends and there's a blessing around the corner. And God just hit me with that, like, okay, if I never give you another thing, could you still serve me? Could you still love me? Could you still, at that depth, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, this is a hard one, God, but yes. And it took nearly 3 months after that before God actually showed me where the next door opening was going to be, before he started to speak to me about what was next. And I felt like in that period, he was just testing me, like, so let's put you to the test and see if you really are going to do what you said you're going to do. Do you still love me? You're still going to pray? You're still going to trust? You can sit in nomad's land, not knowing where the next destination is, and be okay on the ship. With the winds blowing around you. You still got bills to pay. You still got everything. But can you just rest in the ship? You know what I'm saying? So when it pulled up to shore, I was like, thank you, Jesus. I can see the sand up there somewhere. So, yeah.
Oh, gosh. It's just interesting speaking to you, seeing how it's only a year ago.
Yeah.
This is not something that, when I was 21, God did this, and now this is last 12 months, 18 months, whatever 100%. It might have been. I want to go back just a little bit because one of the things that I found out was that you went to university to do broadcast journalism.
Yeah.
And I said, so why is she not on the TV? Why is she not presenting the news? Like, what happened to that? Why did you do that initially?
Yeah.
And what changed your path?
Yeah.
From that into where you are now?
That is fantastic. I'm still asking myself that question. Why am I not on news? Why is that not my face on the screen? I'm like, I went in for 3 years. I studied broadcast journalism because I really wanted to be a news reporter. In fact, I wanted to be an international war correspondent. Yeah, I think some of that was coming from my dad being in the forces. So I was like, that's what I want to be. I want to be on the front line. I had this kind of fearlessness about wanting to bring truth about particular locations and countries and places we don't always get to go to. So I did that for 3 years in Southampton. And then it was incredibly hard for me to get a job in the field, And so I was writing to ITV, Sky News, I was writing everywhere I possibly can, BBC, Channel 5, Channel 4, and looking for an opportunity. And I still have it, a portfolio of all the rejection letters from all those different locations, literally. And so I still needed income, money to come in. So I started going into teaching, just doing that through agency work to keep money coming in. And then I remember I felt this really inner tug, like I needed to go to America. Yeah, so this was like 2006, thereabouts, 2007, sorry. So I spoke to my parents and said, look, I really feel like I need to go to the States. I was like, okay, cool. So I booked it, then I went, stayed for 3 months. And the initial plan was I'm just going to go and stay with my aunt in Baltimore. So this is where the career plot shifts. So I'm with one of my cousins. She's working in elementary school. I speak to the principal there and I'm like, hi, is it okay if I support my cousin while she's teaching? They didn't give me no checks, nothing. It was like, yeah, that's fine, just come in. And so they had me there. I was working with these elementary school kids and it was amazing. Some of them had been held back a year. Yeah. One girl in there, she was mute from seeing her dad shot at point blank range. God was really cultivating in me a very deep kind of compassion and heart for a lot of these kids who were from the projects. I didn't know that going there, but whilst I was there, I learned that. So I visited a church, went to Jamal Bryant's church. They preached, this week God's going to bring a breakthrough. I said, I've heard this before. I know you have. And so I was, I went through the week and I thought, we'll see what happens. That week, we went for a buffet lunch in the afternoon. I'm there minding my own business. And the CNN individuals, two individuals, ABC News Channel 7, two individuals are walking past. One black guy who's doing the interviewing, taking vox pops, the other lady is doing all the camera and stuff. I walk straight past them, and then I remember what God had said. And I said to my cousin, hold on, I need to go back. And I walked right up to them and I said to them, hi, my name's Sharlette. I did broadcast journalism when I was back in London. I'm looking for an opportunity to do some work experience. She gave me her card, and within literally a week, they'd asked me for a CV and asked me to come in first day. And I was there literally for 2 weeks. I stayed there for 2 weeks doing work experience, met all the anchors, met everybody, producers, directors, everybody, went in the editing suite, went out in the field with them. Wow. And I was like, I cannot believe that this is happening. Because this is what I asked for, what I prayed for, literally. I'm in someone else's country and it's all turning out good for me. I was like, okay, Jesus, you know.
I already know how this is turning. I already know how this is going to turn out. So
I'm there. We're having a great time. Director comes to me. He says, Sharlette, we'd like to keep you on. Now, I am in a tension of passion. This is the thing I've always wanted to do. I have the opportunity to do it. Had all the rejection letters. And then suddenly, I'm being offered the opportunity I prayed and cried for. But there was a problem.
And there's a hesitation too.
I sat there one day and I said, even though I'm doing what I've always wanted to do, it ain't hitting me the same way.
I
You knew it was coming.
I've been there. I've been there. I know exactly where this is going.
I sat there, I said, it's not hitting me the same way as when I was working with the kids in the elementary school. And it was such a tension within. I'm like, have you lost your mind? This is ABC News Channel 7. They're asking you to stay. What's going on? Yep. And honestly, I told them I can't stay. I knew I had a work to do with children. And I think to come to that moment when you're facing something you always thought you desired and wanted, and then you realize, really, I don't think that is what I want. It didn't satisfy this deep sense of purpose in me. It just didn't. I went back, I told my aunt, and there was another conference I was meant to attend. And that really was the pivoting time when I got into education, started my own tutoring company, all of those things. So that was how the career shift took a left, really. And I would say sometimes, I've realized sometimes you get exposed to stuff you thought you always wanted, and then you say, I thought that was what I wanted for different reasons, but it just isn't satisfying the purpose in me in the same way. So my direction and course changed. Yeah.
You know what's like, I knew what was going to happen before you even said what was going to happen.
Right.
And the reason is because I understand that the feeling that we have to do certain things, if it's not where we're meant to be, it doesn't come at that time where we had that feeling.
100.
So when you feel like, I really want to do it, when you felt that, this, I'm applying and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And then it came, it was like,
Yeah.
I thought this was it.
I thought this was it. I thought this was what I wanted so badly. I cried tears over this. You know what I'm saying? And I was thinking, this is ludicrous. I can't believe this is even happening to me. But God was so intentional. Can I add one other point? He was so intentional. When I came back, I continued to work in education, and I felt like I wanted to do a master's. So I applied to do a master's at London Met in foreign affairs. See how I'm still leaning there. It's fully converted. It takes a
still trying to fly.
He's still working on me. Still working on me. There's tension within. And then Met said, no, we don't want you. Basically rejected me. Said, no, we can't offer you a place on this course. Fine, cool. So instead of leveling down, I leveled up because I knew I'm meant to be going to university. And I said, I'm not settling for London, Met. I'm going to take it up. So I applied to London King's College University. And at the time, they were in the top 12. I said, what's a gamble? But I changed it to education policy and society. King's then wrote to me and said, oh, I'd love to offer you a place, blah, 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 blah. I start the course. I'm doing a master's now. I passed the first module. I failed the second module. I'd never failed in anything academically before, so it hit me hard. I passed the third module. I failed the fourth module, which meant that I would have to retake a module. In the midst of this, I'm like, this is great. God, what's going on? The essays, I'm spending the most time on the essays that I'm actually failing in. I'm working on my dissertation. In that period of time, my grandmother on my dad's side passes away from cancer. So I'm broken. I'm crying. Every time I'm coming to my dissertation, I'm broken. I meet with the head of my dissertation tutor that you're allocated. I'm saying to her, every time I sit down to study and work, I'm crying, I'm a mess, I'm this, I'm that. Keep on going, she said, keep on going. Mel was her name. I prayed about it. And this is going to sound really weird, especially to you guys listening, but suddenly I felt the Lord say, S, you need to leave from the studies. Now that's going to sound crazy, especially when you know all the backstory of what it took to get you into the university in the first place. But I was so compelled by it. I said to my dad and my mom, I said, I'm going to be stepping back from my master's. They're thinking, girl, you know how much money you're going to pay back, and you talk about you sit back for your master's and you haven't got a qualification to show for it.
Yeah.
I just knew I had. I knew what I heard, sir. So I stepped away from it. Didn't complete my dissertation, didn't retake the module. A year went by. Another year went by. And in between that, people were saying, when are you going to go back and complete your master's in your study? I had no comment because I didn't feel I was ever going to go back and complete it.
But you didn't want to tell them?
Didn't want to tell them. So we get to about the second year after me pulling out of studies. It is September, October time, I get an email from King's. King's emailed me saying, your graduation's coming up, with all the links on how to get all the garments and et cetera, that you need before graduation. But because you get alumni emails as a past student, I just thought it was in error. We transition now, September, October, November, December. We're into January of the following year. We're into February the 14th. It's Valentine's Day. I'm upstairs. Caring, my mum's mother was living with us at the time. She had Alzheimer's dementia, so I'm helping to care for her. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. The carer goes to answer it, brings out this big A4 envelope with cardboard at the front, King's College stamp at the front. Signs for it, because it's a signed for envelope. So we're making sure that I've definitely got it. I come downstairs, walk into the sitting room, crack open this envelope. You know what's coming. Suddenly, as I open this, there's a front letter. DJ Haych, the front letter says, we're sorry you weren't able to make it to your graduation that took place. It was the early end of the previous year. So we have sent you your master's certificate in education policy and society. When I took out the second piece of paper, sir, it was the full certificate saying we award Sharlette Elizabeth Reid a MA in Education Policy and Society with the principal's stamp and signature, the head of the faculty, and my lead tutor's signature on there. When I got that, I put it back in the envelope because it was so surreal. It was so wild, and everyone had known I'd stepped away, so this was going to be a big testimony. I put it back on the mantelpiece, and I sat on the sofa thinking, it's been 2 years. I've made no attempt to even contact these people. I haven't done the dissertation. I haven't completed the module. And I began to cry on that sofa. And you know the scripture that came to me? Obedience is better than sacrifice, Sharlette. My mum came in, because I called my dad. My mum came in, and she was shocked. And then everybody else who knew I stepped back from my studies couldn't believe it. How can this happen? It must be an accident. I said, you don't accidentally do a certificate and get it signed for to make sure that the person has actually received it. DJ Haych, I tell you, there's so many different testimonies that don't make sense along the way. That when the course changes and the career path changes, I've learned to just go with the change. Do you know what I'm saying? And sometimes with tears in my eyes. Because I couldn't think of why God would take me into a course and then pull me out of a course and me not complete it and still have to pay back all the student fees. But I still gave God thanks. That's it. Thank you, Jesus.
You know what's amazing about that story? You didn't even apply to go to King's College in the first place. That wasn't what you wanted to study.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years
Yeah.
from when you last took that 4th module, which you failed,
Yeah.
to receiving the certificate
On Valentine's Day.
on Valentine's Day. It's just...
Yeah, it's wild.
It's just...
Yeah.
And for people who have never really experienced God
Yeah.
in this manner,
Yeah.
it sounds weird to them.
Of course, yeah.
What? You should email them, just to make sure that it's you and it's not for another Sharlette Reid that goes to...
Right.
Why have you still kept those rejection letters from your broadcast journalism?
To be honest, I felt like I was just developing a portfolio of... When it was initially happening, I was honestly just building it up. Like, it'd be another one coming in through weeks. But I've held onto it because it reminds me where I'm coming from. It reminds me of how many no's I heard, only to realize it wasn't something I wanted anyway. And it keeps me humble. It keeps me humble.
Really?
Yeah, because you know what? That was my effort. The human effort was all the letters I was writing to try and get the door open. But when God opened the door for me, which was not human effort, because all now some of my people are like, ABC, how did that even happen? You were only there for 3 months. You just went there because you felt you were meant to. How comes a door open for you over there? And I feel as though that opening was a divine opening, but it was there just to show me, honey, this ain't where you're meant to be. This ain't where you're meant to be. So I'll let you have what you've been praying for, crying over. I'll let you have it, but you're going to see it's not where you're meant to be.
How do you develop into them becoming this international speaker, preacher? And what happens in Antigua that changes your course? Is just the thing just keeps changing.
It keeps shifting up.
Things just keep shifting.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
In your life.
Yeah.
From when you were younger, from when your dad took you out of ballet.
Yes.
And put you in karate.
Yes. Yeah.
Where you probably cried tears then.
Yes, sir.
Because you didn't want to do karate.
Didn't want to do karate.
Fast forward into the rest of your life. You just said to us, you've cried tears when God has then made a change with your life. So how do you, international speaker, preacher, and what happens in Antigua about 8-9 years ago?
Right. So, I didn't come from a Pentecostal church, moves of the Spirit, all of this stuff. I actually really didn't like it because I didn't understand it. And I had come from a Baptist church. I spent time with my grandmother in a Catholic church. I then got saved in a Sabbath-keeping church. and ended up residing in a Pentecostal church. So I felt like I had gone through so many other passages along the way.
But that's your life, though.
And this is my life. This is my life.
If it's not a different
Absolutely.
country, it's a different type of church.
And it's interesting because in every pathway there's learning. And I think I've learned to see life as an adventure because of that. You know, it's valleys, it's peaks, it's troughs, it's mountain places, but it's learning. And the Baptist church was kind of stiff, you know, sing our hymns and all of those type of things. But they were big on love, they were big on community, they were big on missions. Those things I felt God wanted to graft in me. When I came to Pentecostal church, they weren't big on all the same things. Some of them, you know. But I had to develop and learn from I was a virgin to Pentecostalism. I didn't know about the expressions of the move of the Spirit. I didn't know about infilling, speaking in tongues. I didn't even know there were gifts of the Spirit. Because Baptist are cessationalists, they believe that there aren't expressions of the Spirit in the same way. Not all of them, but most of them have that position. And so after I'd got saved, I was quite a loner. Because I got saved whilst I was 17, I was in sixth form. I wanted to know God. I had this hunger to know God. And what compelled me to know God was his love. Honestly, it was his love. So I think throughout the journey, I spent a lot of isolated time just in my word. I would read the words till early hours of the morning, study. I would write sermons on my own in my dining area. I spent so much time in the word, in prayer, as such a young person that my mum was like, if you don't stop all of this, you ain't going to pass your A-levels because you're spending more time in this than you are. But I had this insatiable hunger, this thirst to know who this divine being was. And by any means necessary, I'd made an oath to God, which was, Lord, as long as you show yourself real to me, I'll continue to serve you, which is it's an interesting thing to say. But I remember being in my dining area about 18 and the Lord spoke to me very clear. And this was the first time I'd really heard the Lord's voice. It was an inner voice, but it was very loud. It was not my own. And as in I knew I wasn't speaking to myself. And then never forget it. The Lord said to me, I've called you as a prophet to the nations. Many will rise up against you, but they will not prevail because I am with you. And I will never forget it. And I remember thinking, what on earth is a prophet? Because I'd never heard it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nations are rising up against me.
I'd be shook. I'd be so shook. Nations? What do you mean?
I was thinking, we just started in this journey. People are already angry. You know what I'm saying?
People already know your name.
Oh my days. So, you know, I wasn't church like that where you hear that churchy language, you're like, shika, blah, blah. No, I was like, Lord, what's a prophet? First of all, why is this happening to me? What are you saying?
You're fresh in this?
I'm fresh, and I don't. So I had to discover and I had to study. And really that was kind of the very infancy of me learning the shepherd's voice. You know, the Bible says my sheep know my voice. And I felt like I was hearkening to his voice. I was learning his voice all by myself. And so till one day I went to NTA Tooting to visit from my Sabbath keeping church. I was about six pews from the front and I began speaking in tongues. The Lord said to me, stand up. Now at that point, the woman in front of me turned around and said, keep quiet because the bishop is talking. And she said it just like that. So I was like, oh, this is not my church. I'm 18, I'm new up in this stuff. And at the same time, I'm thinking, am I even hearing right? Because it's just been me and Jesus at home. And attending church on Sundays, the first time I felt an instructive word. And I was like, sure, it don't matter, it ain't your church. You don't have to come back here next week. So I stood up at that point. And I remembered that the Lord had me speak in a very slow tongue. And the first lady from the church got up and she interpreted it and said, the Lord is calling us to a place of repentance. The service stopped. Everybody was at the front, including myself. We was repenting at the altar and the Lord was speaking, speaking instruction to our hearts through the set woman of God. And after that, there was this thing of, who is this young lady that's coming to our church and blah, blah, blah. But it was also a test of obedience, because I feel like that's the fragrance of my life is, I see certain things because God gives me an instruction and he's like, are you going to obey me? Are you going to go to America? Are you going to leave your university? It's always about obedience. So I'm there now and I'm thinking, okay, God, wow, you showed up strong. I know your voice because I know that you spoke to me. And that really was the thrust into me learning more about the call that God's had in my life. He opened up doors for me in my local church. He caused people to contact my local church who I'd never known and invite me to their local church, because I didn't have, my dad's not a preacher, my mum's not a preacher. They don't come from that background at all, you know what I'm saying? So it was new to me. And so I looked to the mothers in the church as a reference point. And a lot of them did take me under their wing, to help me to grow in the things of God. And so doors just started to open up. My first international, as an international speaker, happened because I preached at a church. The pastor who was there wrote to my bishop and he said, we want to confirm the prophetic call on this young woman of God's life. I had mentioned to them that another ministry was planning on going to South Africa and wanted to take me with them. And that bishop so Church 1, Church 2, I'm traveling with Church 1. Church 2 says, we want to pay all the money for her to travel to go to South Africa. And I was like, how's this happening? God, these people don't even know me. I only went to the church once. My bishop then calls me in and says, oh, Sharlette, you can go to South Africa and this church has offered to pay everything that you need to travel with Church 1. And that was my first opening to the mission field in South Africa, which was one of the most transformational times of my life, actually. And we were there for like 2 weeks. So God he propelled that. He had me, I was at home and just wanting to know God, study God, breathe God, live God. I want to be wrapped up in him, and I wanted to show that forth in the way I engaged with people, the way I loved people, and in the gospel message. I was really committed to it. Antigua 2015 was my brother's wedding. On that point, we traveled out. Antigua is gorgeous. If you're out there, you're from Antigua. The place is incredible. And I had been doing tutoring for quite some time in the business with kids. I was like, God, I got bills to pay still, and things just wasn't taking off the way that I wanted at that point. I prayed and I asked God whilst I was in Antigua one night, like, what's next? I need a solution, God. I need to see what's next. I'm away from all the busyness. I'm in this beautiful location. I'm quiet. I'm still. Please speak to me, And I was very frustrated. I'll be really honest. I was like, God, I'm serving you. I'm doing all these things and I'm starting to get tired. I'm starting to feel weary, I need some breakthrough heavy. That night, I dreamt that I'd written a book. So I woke up and I was really disappointed.
Oh, because you...
Number one, I'd never written a book. Number two, a book takes time to write.
Yep.
And number three, the book is not an automatic solution to my problem. You know what I'm saying? So I was not happy. So I didn't write that book. In 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, I sat down in my house and said, Sharlette, there's an instruction that's just been hanging in the ether. Sometimes you just get to a point in your life where you're like, I'm lining up all the dots. I'm trying to collect everything. And you're trying to work out something just ain't lining up. And that's where I got to. And the Lord reminded me, I gave you an instruction and you still ain't moved on it. And I'm talking, we're in 4 years down the line. Because sometimes God will ask you to do a whole bunch of stuff you don't really want to do. And so in 2019, I sat down and I began framing what is now known today as the Emerge book.
What's interesting about that part of your story is it feels like it was the one time you weren't as obedient as you have been in other previous times.
Yeah.
Because that took you 4 years.
Yeah.
And normally you move very quickly.
100%.
So what I'm trying to work out is, why did that take so long
Yeah.
compared to everything else where you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Was it just the fact that it was a book, something that you weren't...
I didn't see myself as an author.
Okay.
I didn't think I could write something that could sell. I knew I was good with my mouth and speaking, but penning something to paper, I wasn't confident. I wasn't confident in my writing ability. I'd never seen myself as an author. I didn't see writing a book as a solution to the prayer either. I also knew it would make another demand on my time. And I already felt spent. I only got through the Emerge book because I had sleepless nights. I had days that rolled into the next day where I didn't even sleep. Do you know what I'm saying? I realized no one was going to give me any more time. So it would be a sacrifice for me to write this book on top of everything else I was doing. On top of, 3 major school contracts, managing a staff team of 7 individuals, whilst doing home tuition, whilst doing after school club at these different locations, whilst running 3 different centers in 3 different locations as well, and then write a book. I was like, Lord, how? How? And so, I feel there's some seasons of our life you don't get grace with more time. He knows for you to break through that threshold and enter into a different place, to see yourself from a different place, means that you have to make a sacrifice. And sometimes it's costly. And for me, it was my sleep. I nearly didn't do the Emerge book because I got so far at one point and then I was thinking, gee, we got a whole pandemic going on, but pandemic gave me time to tighten up the notches to complete what I needed to complete. And I would read back stuff and I would think, what would people's opinion be? Because when you put something to paper, it stays there. Yeah. I had all of that going on in my head. Plus, I never grew up being good at writing. With all the travel we did when I was younger, and I think maybe this was at the base of it, I had to go to special support lessons in English because I was behind, because of all the travel and all the movement. Yeah. So I had to go to special education classes down the end of the corridor and do one-to-ones and all of that type of stuff, to catch up. So I never really felt, a whole heap of confident. Not that I couldn't write. I went through secondary. I did good at GCSE and I got through broadcast journalism, thank God. But I just wasn't confident. Yeah.
How do you manage your non-profit organization, Pure Consecration, the event that you put on? I don't want to call it an event. I want to call it what would you call it? It's not an event. Encounter. Thank you very much. Ministry, as well as relationships with people within your church and friendships and all those sorts of things. How do you manage all of that? You've just spoken about time.
Yeah. I think I've got used to multitasking. When you do have your own business, for all the business owners, you know what it is to be spinning lots of plates until you can afford to pay people to do some of the roles you do. So I think you develop those competencies over time. But I think that I've never built without bringing people along in the journey. And really, the ability that I have to be so flexible in these different spaces is really because of the people that serve. Yeah. There's really great men and great women who have partnered with the vision and have brought their skills, their talents, their time, their commitment, and just aligned with the vision. And sometimes it is taxing for me because you're taking on diverse roles. You know, the Poor Consecration is more it's very spiritual, it's very deep, it's a very intimate time, you know, with God and with the people. But
even so, that still pulls from you as well.
100%, it does. So and that's why I love travel, because travel for me is my time to press pause. And I've been more conscious of that over the last year or two, to make that time and say, S, you need to take a break, because otherwise it is quite depleting, you know? And so I've been intentional about creating spaces to replenish and to kind of heal and recover and then come back into work, you know? And at one point I wasn't doing that. I was just in the throngs, just going and going. So I've learned some lessons along the way that keep me balanced. Yeah.
How have you changed your mindset from last year to this? What's one thing you've had to change your mindset on from 12 months ago to now?
Okay, one of the biggest things is to break out of some of my own, I would say, my own constructions. Yeah, when I say constructions, they're ideas that I have held about myself quite heavily that say, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, but you don't do this, this, and this. I've given more permission to myself to explore the other parts of who I am, other things I might enjoy, to give things a chance a little bit more, especially when it comes to just innovations and opportunities and just doing things I've never done before. And some of that began last year when I took a leap, a 10,000-foot leap out of a plane. That was the beginning of me doing something I'd never done before. I'm afraid of heights. And I did that on purpose because I said, I don't want the fear of heights to keep me restricted and constrained. So I faced my fear, you know? I was trembling in the plane, but and I screamed and I kept my eyes closed for most of it. And then last year doing, I can't even remember how many thousand miles it was, walk for charity, you know? Those things just move me out of kind of the regimented work I do and just expose myself to new opportunities and new experiences. And I'm just giving myself more permission to just deconstruct all the things that I think, Shar, you can't do that. It's too hard for you to do. And I'm going against the grain. And some of that grain isn't other people, it's just me.
So you'd say that you've constructed all these things?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it is other people, but I'm a good generator of my own constructions. And I think most of us are. Like, this is what I do, you know? Or this is who I am. And it's like, well, who you are isn't what you do, you know? And I'm very open at 39 to explore those different aspects, things I haven't done before, and just do them.
Speaking of kind of things you haven't done before, exploring new aspects, do you feel like there is more of a Sharlette Reid that isn't behind the pulpit that we are yet to see more of?
Yeah, like 100%. I think when I'm up there and, you know, my nephew says, oh, Charlotte, you know, every so often there's a clip of you shouting on Instagram. I say, thanks, Michelle, that's really kind. But I think, you know, when you're preaching and you're bringing forth the word, that's one way of people perceiving you, you know, and we all have different styles, and some people think, oh, that's who you are. But actually, you know, you're in church for like 2 hours of your whole week, you know. So I think that I've created more scope and opportunity, even through some of the new projects I'm doing, to allow people to see me in different ways, in different contexts. Most people who are close to me are like, she's crazy, she's wild, she's well-humored, she's funny. But you won't always get that, especially if
you only see for 2 hours and...
Right. And sometimes they give me the hard verses to preach. I've realised this. They'd be like, oh yeah, we'll put Sharlette down to preach that verse. And I'm like, give me something that's nice, you know? So yeah, I think that there's a lot more opportunity for people to see different sides. Yeah.
Is there a lot more you want out of life personally? And do you feel well positioned enough to receive it?
I think I'm adapting. And I think in life, the beauty of being open to new experiences is your ability to adapt and change and be flexible. And sometimes we think we're more flexible than we are, and God uses situations to make you more flexible. I think I've become more flexible over the last few years, but I think I'm definitely open in this season to a lot of different opportunities, and I'm creating some of those opportunities intentionally, you know. When I went to the States beginning of this year, it's the first time I've kind of been away over the Christmas period into the new year, and I moved around. I was in Dallas, I was in Atlanta, DC, Virginia, just moved around. And it was great. I got to breathe out, no expectations, no anything. But I got to sit under different leaders. I got to see different methods, different styles. I got to see people with very vast visions for community and transformation and change. And I was stirred. It provoked me, it prodded me in some places. And one of the biggest lessons I took from that, which has really shifted me coming into this year, has been really around developing more community and building community through many other expressions through what I do. So I started a new organization this year called All Community. All just means light in Hebrew. And the All Community focuses on occupying, relating, and exhaling. So things like TPC comes under Occupy. We launched another initiative the day of the Poor Consecration called Exhale Away. It's all around deep soul healing, all of that type of stuff. But I mean, we're doing it nice. We've got swimming pool, we've got sauna, we've got tennis courts, we got bicycles, we got massage, we've got everything going on. And I've not done it in a conventional retreat center either. I found a massive mansion house. And I said, okay, God, we're going to do it here. And we're going to let the children of God splash out, have a great time, but also work on deep inner healing. By the time they come up out of that, God, I'm believing you to do some really deep change, you know. And so I'm looking at doing things in an unconventional way, you know. I think that more of us should travel, because I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and that's something I'm taking into this new season more, is taking people away to places they have never been before to really experience the depth of culture and see what God is doing in other nations. You know, one of my brothers lives in South Korea, and when we went there, it was incredible. You know, just an exposure to the Eastern culture. And I always say to people, you know, we only really see, in hindsight, a speck if you've only been to the West. You know what I'm saying? There's the Middle East, there's the East. And there's some different things happening in all of those quadrants, in all of those places and spaces. And sometimes innovation's not coming in the space you're in. Sometimes you've got to go out and find it. You know what I'm saying? You've got to see people doing things and breaking the mold and unconventional, and it looks different and it sounds different and it is different. And you come back and you sit with that.
And now you're inspired to
And
do...
now you've inspired. You know what I'm saying? So I like to be amongst the people, sit with the people, all of that. And I feel like it's changed a lot of what I do and the way that I live. And I'm intentional about taking another generation on that journey. You know, I said, next year I want to take a group of people to China. We're going to go China. going to sit with the Chinese people. We're going to eat Chinese foods, do all the street food stuff. We're also going to look at how the culture is different from the West. We're going to have deep conversation. We're going to see how pervasive the gospel could be here. We're going to understand really what it was like for the apostles to come into these territories where you're dealing with traditions and religious mindsets and all of these type of nuances, and really just get in there, you know? And I'm just doing my part, yeah.
The opportunities and the things that you sound you've got planned for the future sound amazing.
Praise God.
And I now understand why you are how you are. Just your story alone explains to me why you are how you are in the pulpit, or why you are how you are in conversation, or why you post what you post on Instagram. Like, this conversation explains it a lot more. And I know it's been a blessing to people who've been watching. My last question to you today, with where you're at in life right now, what advice would you give to yourself?
I got one line: progress in the process. Progress in the process. The process doesn't stop. This is what I feel for myself, I've learned. I'm seated in a place of constantly being teachable. You know what I'm saying? And to discover new parts of who I am, I have to be challenged. And the challenge isn't always going to come to me. Sometimes I have to go to places that challenge me. Sit amongst people who think differently to how I think, and not be afraid of that. And so I would say to Sharlette, keep pushing forward, keep progressing in the process of life. Keep striving to be more. Don't lose your hunger. Don't get stuck. I love people. I don't keep saying it, but I genuinely love people. That's why I like to be around people, because people teach you. Challenging people humble you, but people will teach you. And when you learn compassion and empathy, you become less critical of people. You know what I'm saying? And you look for some pathway, some way in the story of which to learn something. And I think that's just where I am at this season of my life. I'm trying to shift the way I think, even about people. You know, none of us are perfect. I still have hang-ups, and there's things I like, and sometimes God has to work on my patience with people. But generally, I think I'm getting there. I'm making some progress. I'm making some steps, and I'm not perfect by any means, shape or form, but I think I'm in a good place. Yeah.
Sharlette Reid, thank you very much.
Thank you, DJ Haych.
We really appreciate it. This has been Conversation with Haych with the amazing Sharlette Reid, also known as Elder Sharlette Reid. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all those types of things. And we have more content coming for you very, very soon.